Hello and welcome to today's 30-second webinar in the On the Move webinar series, Micro-Fulfillment Strategies for the Future of Omnichannel Retail, brought to you by Honeywell Intelligrated. I'm Tracy Niehaus, Director of Marketing for Honeywell Intelligrated, and I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. Please note that this presentation's audio is provided by phone number or through your computer's sound system, so be sure to turn up your computer's volume. You may ask an online question at any time throughout today's presentation in the Q&A feature along the bottom of your screen. Simply type your question into the text area and hit send. Questions will be addressed at the conclusion of the presentation, with the exception of technical questions that can be asked and will be answered real time. Please note we recommend that you be hardwired when attending this webinar. A Wi-Fi connection may result in lag times in slides updating, graphics loading, and videos playing. Today's webinar includes polling questions. Please feel free to answer these questions when they appear and be sure to click submit so we can include your response, as we will be sharing the results real time during this live event. If you'd like to revisit key sections of today's webinar, it will be available on demand at intelligrated.com/on-the-move approximately 48 hours after this live event. You'll also receive an email in a couple of days with a link to the recorded event. Now on to the presentation, Micro-Fulfillment Strategies for the Future of Omnichannel Retail. Discussing today's topic will be Eric Hardy, Vice President of the Robotics Solutions Offering. Eric brings more than 15 years of international experience to Intelligrated, with a strategy and marketing background in developed and emerging markets. In his current role, he is responsible for Robotics Solutions Offering, developing and executing the robotics offering, ranging from fixed robotics to mobile robotics in e-commerce, retail, parcel, and micro-fulfillment environments. Prior to his current role, he led strategic marketing, developing the company's global growth strategy focused on organic growth through the Connected Distribution Center and robotics, as well as inorganic growth through M&A and venture capital investments. Before joining Honeywell Intelligrated, Eric led strategy and marketing for Honeywell in Turkey and Central Asia. He has previous experience as a strategy consultant at Booz & Company and as a director of strategic planning at Siemens. Also presenting today is John Dillon, Vice President of Operations and Solutions Development. In his current role, John leads the strategic business focused on creating and delivering advanced automation and robotic solution fulfillment solutions for S&P 100 companies. His responsibilities include solutions consulting, design, simulation, data analysis, and operational consulting. John has 25 years of industry experience working with highly automated and robotic solutions. Previous positions include executive roles with Swisslog Logistics Automation as Vice President, E-commerce and Retail, and Winwright Corporation, where he served as Senior Vice President, Client Care, Lifecycle Solutions, and Divisional President, Controls and Software. Throughout his career, he has successfully led business units through all aspects of the project lifecycle: consulting, design, engineering, activation, and support. And with those introductions, the webinar will now begin.
Thank you, Tracy. So hi, everyone. I'm Eric Hardy. I'm going to introduce the topic here on micro-fulfillment. So micro-fulfillment, what we see micro-fulfillment as being is using small DCs to place the inventory closer to the consumer to shorten delivery times and distances for delivery. This is especially evident in the e-commerce area, especially in emerging grocery e-commerce. What we see driving the need for e-commerce or for these micro-fulfillment centers is really 6 drivers. And those 6 drivers are e-commerce growth, with customers demanding faster delivery, increasing urbanization, so people living in more urban areas. And then when you move into these urban areas, there's less space for warehousing. So there's a lack of warehouse space in these areas. In addition to that, you have increased SKU proliferation, You have multiple different varieties of different goods that are out there. For example, shirts come in multiple different colors than what they used to. There's a lot of different variety of goods. And you need to be able to handle all those and manage those to be able to deliver those to your customers on time. In addition to that, you have labor challenges, difficulty finding labor in certain markets. In addition to that, there are in-store fulfillment challenges. And when we talk about in-store fulfillment challenges, we see that most retailers are taking the approach of using in-store shoppers to fulfill their e-commerce orders. Now, within here, there are a couple of problems that emerge for the retailers here. You have complaints from other shoppers that are in the store that the in-store shoppers are clogging the aisles and making it difficult to access goods. And you also have complaints of inventory management, being able to understand what's on the shelves. At times you could have your in-store shoppers that are working for you pick goods ahead of something that a regular shopper needs, or vice versa. And being able to manage those drives some overall challenges. So these are what we see are the main challenges that are really creating the perfect conditions for micro-fulfillment to emerge. And now, with that, we wanted to open up a polling question to everyone here to really get to your input and your analysis on what you see as the main drivers. So we're going to give you roughly about 10 seconds for you to go ahead and fill this out and let us know, and then we'll regroup here on what the overall results are and talk a little bit about that further. So let's see here. All right. So this is more or less what I expected. Of the customers we've talked to so far, a lot of people are saying that the real motivation behind all this is e-commerce growth, being able to get out there into the market, especially with COVID, the COVID pandemic that's been ongoing. We've heard customers have really strong growth in e-commerce, being near where their anywhere from 3 to 5 year projections were, being at that right now. And the other area that comes up a lot is the in-store challenges that I talked about lastly. And then lack of urban space, being able to find the right solution that fits that. So definitely that's in line with a lot of the challenges that we're seeing out there. John, do you have anything you want to?
Yeah, hey, this
you want to
is
add to this?
John Dillon. I don't think there's any surprise there with the e-commerce being a driver, but you know, the labor has shifted from labor availability, right, to just general labor challenges with COVID and health and safety. You know, as you think about a warehouse, we know over the years that warehouses, you know, automation has proven out versus manual picking. Even if a warehouse is laid out perfectly to support manual picking, right? So when we think here about a retail store or grocery store, they are certainly not laid out optimally for manual picking. And
Right.
you know, as you try to do that, it's amazing. The complications that come up aren't really surprising, but I think that's a key driver here beyond the e-commerce growth is just you can only get so many manual picks out of a retail store. In their current layout, that's, I think, going to become a bigger driver here as we go forward.
Right, and that's where we see the micro-fulfillment centers, and if we go to the next slide, they provide that flexibility to get that picking up to speed. So when we look at what does this solution profile look like, it's a small footprint, so less than 20,000 square feet, and it can vary. Then handling SKUs from 8,000 to 15,000 SKUs, fitting that back into that micro fulfillment center, and really providing that distributed fulfillment agility. So shortening that last mile delivery and supporting in-store and curbside pickup. And then as we talked about before, these solutions need to be flexible, right? So they can be co-located with the store or within the store or a standalone facility. And what we've developed here is a whole range of solutions from partially automated to fully automated using robotics. And it's really having the flexibility to add this into the backup store or into a standalone solution that will really help you get that scale in your e-commerce delivery that John was talking about on the last slide.
And Eric, I think, as we think about urban areas, as customers think about putting micro fulfillment centers in urban areas like a dark store, the reality is there's very little real estate available. So flexibility is important. And again here, leveraging existing assets in retail stores is so important in this overall story as well.
Right. So what we see is in this space, e-commerce is growing. We have a lot of retail customers that have brick and mortar stores. So I think the challenges that we see is how are these customers reacting to the e-commerce growth? Can they use the stores to be in their advantage and really capture a lot of the e-commerce growth? And what we've seen is one way to do that is through this micro-fulfillment strategy. And that allows you to leverage your in-store or your current network and build out locations that are closer to the network, to your customer. So what we've seen talking to some customers, they already have the network built out to where they're covering anywhere from 80 to 90% of the US population with their stores. So what this does is it allows you to get that e-commerce coverage as well using micro-fulfillment. So John, if we could go to the next slide. The next slide is actually a poll here. So if we could pull up the poll. What we want to do is get an understanding from our audience here on what are the most important design aspects for the micro-fulfillment center. And there are 4 options that we have here. So SKU count, optimum SKU count, that's really to maximize the density, throughput, maximizing orders, and then minimum footprint, so having a small footprint that fits within your profile, and then flexibility to scale or add more to it. So we'll let you work through the polling questions here.
The results are in.
And the results are in. This one's a little more stratified than the last one, where we saw that e-commerce was clearly 50, I think it was like more than 50% said that was the main area to focus on. Here we're seeing roughly, I would probably statistically, it's a tie between, well, it's actually just 1 vote difference between throughput and flexibility to scale. With SKU count and minimum footprint being of a lower ranking here, which I actually find fairly interesting. And I think that the scale is the ability to really kind of build out and be able to adjust what you need in the market there. My guess would have been that throughput would be one of the higher areas as well. Curious that SKU count wasn't exactly up there, but throughput definitely in getting all these orders out to their customers and being able to meet the demands. So
Eric, when we think large DCs, throughput's always top of mind.
Right.
I really expected flexibility to scale to be a bigger impact here. It's right in the mix, but SKU count's interesting. I think we think about the importance of having all this, as many SKUs as possible available in the automation. But what this tells me is probably a lot of people are thinking about leveraging, a bolt on to an existing store where you can still get your low movers from the existing store versus having to put them in the MFC automation solution, possibly, is how people are looking at that.
Okay, yeah. Good. Well, thank you for everyone's input. I will now turn it over to John as we walk through our different solutions here for micro-fulfillment. So John?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. We have 2 solutions today we're going to walk through at a high level. The first one is a bit more of a traditional system, which I chuckle at that a little bit, right? Micro fulfillment centers are new concept, but traditional in that leveraging a ASR shuttle engine, which is really proven technology, been around for a long time, with external goods to person stations. And then also a high density storage solution. In recent years, high density storage solutions have become available, and ours is based on our partner Adibotics core engine. So as we look at these, I think it's important, this kind of positions as grocery, but also can be easily, you can see how it applies to retail as well and other verticals. In the context here of some flexibility, right? This might be bolted on to an existing store. It could serving just that store. It might also be within or bolted onto that existing store, serving a network of stores. It could, serve cross-town delivery to other stores for curbside pickup, or even a standalone dark store in an urban area or to get closer to customers for last mile delivery, or to maybe enter a market where a company doesn't have a presence necessarily today.
Mm-hmm.
So as we jump forward here, let's do a quick polling question here as we level set in the beginning here. I'm curious to see, when you think about micro fulfillment, which of these technologies do you first think about? Do you think about the traditional shuttle solutions, high density storage, or perhaps robotic picking or mobile robots? And we'll touch on all of those today. I have my guess, but let's see. High density storage. It's interesting. Eric, what were you thinking there?
Yeah, so with our conversations with customers, we've seen high density storage be a area that people are really indicating that they want to look at further and further explore, mainly due to the density and the flexibility that you can have and you can scale up there. We've also, which you'll see in our solution, we're going to talk through robotic picking and mobile robots. We actually see those as adding to what we see as the core technology, which is the storage solution. So the storage solution being the shuttle and high density storage. So those really augment it, but it's good to see this kind of layout of how this is flowing here on the poll results. And what I mean by that is I look at the difference between 17 and 15 people on shuttle versus robotic picking is 2 people. So those are roughly about the same. But you see high density storage came out much higher.
Yeah, so we'll spend a little more time on the high density storage solution today,
Mm-hmm.
but each of these definitely has a role to play in micro-fulfillment solutions. So looking first at a shuttle-based solution right here, the footprint generally is a rectangle like it's represented here based upon the constraints of the technology. There are absolutely cases based upon building height, right, where this is an optimal solution to fit. Typically, we're looking at within 20,000 square foot. What you see drawn here represents about 10,000 SKUs. 2 aisles would be the ambient temperatures, and grocery one would be dedicated to chilled and fresh SKUs. We're looking at roughly over 2 shift operation, about 1,000 orders a day or 15,000 tote presentations in this solution. And as we kind of go through the flyby, you'll see the external goods to person workstations, limited really by not so much the machine, but by what a person can do in terms of picks and presentations at a station. And we look to leverage AMRs in this solution as well. So we'll go ahead and jump forward here to a little flyby graphic. Go. So as you see here, we plan a low percentage of freezer picks would be external. We have an area for bulk picks and consolidation of picks that might be from store, leveraging AMRs for assisting the picking process. Here at our goods to person station, you'll see how we present 2 donor totes and we combine into 4 order totes for efficient picking, consolidating the external picks from store or the freezer area or bulk pick area, again with orders to consolidate. What you see here again is order consolidation. There's a lot of configuration here whether or not this would be designed for curbside pickup or delivery in terms of flexibility in the solution and how that all comes together. Probably what you see here represents something that would be put into the side of an existing store, carve out some space from an existing store to lay this optimally into. Again, customized based upon the individual situation. Eric, anything you want to note here? We'll spend a little more time on dense storage.
Well, John, what I was going to add is that what we talked about before about the different technologies, here you see a combination of AMRs with the shuttle technology. And also what we can do, working with your team in OSD, we would build out a customized solution to our customers' needs. You know, the scale, you can add scalability through the robotics by adding more robots. You could also look at some solutions that have that are potentially more conveyor based. And working with your team, you'd work with our customers to kind of lay out what would be the optimal view of what this would look like for their needs.
Yes, that's right. And something to call out here too, with the external goods to person stations, they're highly efficient, but you'll notice that we need the conveyor zone, conveyor routing to transport totes to and from the shuttle engine. I point that out because as we jump ahead and look next at our dense storage solution, you'll notice that isn't the case, right? So as we look at dense storage here, I think it's really important in micro fulfillment to get increased density. So compared to the shuttle, we get about 50% greater density through this, which creates some flexibility to remove some SKUs from the store inventory or perhaps move to a system that is not connected to the store, and we can still handle a greater level of SKUs to meet customer needs. This solution as well, yeah.
And John, when you're saying 50% SKU density, that's using the same square footage that we had for the shuttle in comparison. So some alternatives could be you could reduce your floor space and use less floor space as well, correct?
That's correct, Eric. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to understand here as well that with this solution, it doesn't have to necessarily be a rectangle. We have a lot more flexibility with the high density storage to, that could be an L. We could adjust the height of it. So there's a lot of flexibility in the design. You even notice the integrated goods to person workstations in the solution are on the pickup side, but they can be placed around the structure, and they can be added in easily from a scalability point of view. Just like robots can be added if needed, to scale the business, or the grid can be expanded. So we get a much greater density, higher degree of flexibility in this solution. One other neat thing that we get from this with the higher density is the ability to do opportunistic picking. We didn't talk about it earlier, but along with crowded aisles and some of the challenges, another challenge in micro fulfillment is, maybe not as much right now with so many people work from home, but as we return to work, a lot of people want to pick up their orders between 4 and 6 p.m. They want to place their orders online the night before or at lunchtime. And you can pick ahead those orders and pre-stage them back into a dense storage solution, leveraging that additional tote locations that you have from the increased density. And that's really powerful when you think about labor balancing here. Again, lowest cost of ownership without the conveyors, but let's take a quick look here a little more closely to fly by the solution. So again, we envision freezer picks being external, ambient and cooler being embedded within the grid. Bulk picks, for example, would be external cases of water, things like that, that might not be ideal to fit into the overall solution. As we look through, you'll see the integrated goods to person stations. Again, those can be added around the grid or within the grid to create higher levels of throughput, more flexibility. And what we're doing here, we'll get a look at robotic assisted picking in this consolidation area where we take those external picks and our Momentum software is going to guide them at the right time to allow us to consolidate orders. So we're picking from the grid, we're picking from the robots to order carts. We envision those order carts being AMR guided, and you'll see how those will flow through the facility. We can stage them and have them ready to go for customers for curbside pickup. And obviously that can be adjusted as well if we're looking at delivery type solutions or a combination thereof. Eric, any comments here?
So I think that one thing we wanted to point out here is that there's flexibility on the freezer solution that we've seen talking to some customers, a lower amount of freezer picks that are being combined with orders. So that the size of that freezer pick area would really depend on what customers are seeing for their orders, right? What was the exact amount that you had kind of figured in here for this?
Yeah, we've seen with many customers, it's only 5% for freezer. So sometimes they just top that off from the store. And it can vary, obviously, in a retail situation, there's none, right? So there's a lot of flexibility with that.
Yeah. And John, what I wanted to add here, all these solutions you'll see up in our title slide here, it says ASRS. That's automated storage and retrieval systems. And a subset of that is a shuttle, and a subset of that is the high density storage solution. I think we're getting some questions from the audience on what that exactly meant. So
yeah, thanks for that clarification. I also want to add here that within our dense storage solution, we have the ability, I mentioned, to sequence orders and robots on the lower level, which is really important when we think about just-in-time fulfillment, about knowing when a customer perhaps is 15 minutes away on an app and it's time to prepare their order, and have the ability to queue up those orders on the lower level to pick things in the proper sequence.
And I guess, John, while we're looking at this, it might be good to cover the scalability, right? So how can you increase your scalability in this solution here? Well, a couple of different ways are, again, adding more mobile robots outside of the solution. In addition to that, you could add more ants or bots within the nest or the high density cube. That would increase it as well as adding more structure to that nest or adding more columns and increasing that. And then the flexibility that you have with the high density storage solution here is being able to hit different shapes, being able to so it could be an L shape, it could be more long, it could be more wide. It has that flexibility to fit into different spaces. And John, you want to talk a little bit about what we've heard from customers about back of store and the challenges they're facing and how this could be a good solution?
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely as you look at your store network, you're going to have different available space, right? So in those facilities, so one size fits all doesn't work. Now, obviously from a software perspective, we want one platform, but it's important to have that flexibility in design. Now we're also seeing rapid growth, and it's difficult to predict order volumes. You know, in grocery, we didn't think they'd be where they're at today for a few years, right? So where are we going to be a few years from now? It's difficult to predict. So you can absolutely scale with this. A lot of customers talk about building out the grid to fill the available space, but only starting with maybe 1/10 of the robots they plan to have in the future, or starting with just 2 pick stations, 2 goods to person stations, and expanding those out as they go and adding robots to support growth as it occurs. Is a really good way to get a good ROI from the solution.
Right, and John, while you're here, if you could go back, I think one thing to clarify is that the motion that we're showing here, or what we have here, is from our partner from Adibotics. That allows, you'll see the open squares there, or the open squares being the black squares. Those are the columns that the robots can go down and directly access the totes. Then underneath is what would be called the basement, and where you can get the sequencing that John was referring to earlier.
Well, that's a good call out, because again, in e-commerce, some dense storage solutions might have where you have to do some digging and take a few minutes to get at totes. Here, direct access to all totes in a just-in-time fulfillment e-commerce solution is a huge advantage. Again, knowing that your customer's 10 minutes away and it's time to pick that order, you can get right to it. So I'd like to maybe just wrap up the solutions with, for both of these, we really see, you see here a fetch robot and soft robotics item pick. We really see both of these as ways to enhance the overall solution set, either initially or over time, by leveraging mobile robots and item picking. You know, today, item picking can't pick all SKUs, right? So we could also, in many cases, we plan to designate what SKUs can be picked and route those specifically to a robotic solution station. So we might start out with one goods to person station that's robotic picking. And through artificial intelligence, as we learn how to pick more and more SKUs that fit your inventory, we can then over time expand that out and gradually move towards all robotic picking, or a higher level of robotic picking over time. So we're excited about these technologies as they go forward. Eric, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's this combination that we talked about, right? So being able to build on the different building blocks that we have with the core storage solution, and adding in the additional robotics with AMRs, and then with the fixed picking here with soft robotics. That really will allow our customers to get a good customized solution to fit their needs and the rates they're looking for.
Okay, well, that's great. Well, that kind of covers the content we plan to cover today, an overview of micro fulfillment, and see if we want to open up to any questions.
Sure. So thanks, John and Eric. And John, I should just note, because I'm assuming that you're probably going to be answering some of the questions, that your mic keeps fading in and out. So if you can, I don't know, maybe get closer to your computer or your phone or whatever you're speaking into so that we can hear you better, that would be fantastic. And as John mentioned, we are going to move on to the question and answer portion of our event. Just as a reminder to all of our attendees that you can ask a question online along the bottom of the presentation in the Q&A feature. Again, you can find that at the bottom of your screen. And we do have quite a few questions that have come in. So I'll go ahead and start asking those. And then I guess between the two of you, you can decide who is going to take which of these questions. So our first one is, what types of max rates and throughput can we expect from this solution?
Hey, Tracy, let me confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
All right, great, thank you. I think from an overall throughput, we focus on tote presentations. You know, over a 2-shift operation, we're really about 15,000 tote presentations. With typical grocery orders, we see about 1,000 orders per day. And we've heard from some people that that's more than they need. And I think that's where the scalability comes in, to start small and expand as needed.
Okay. Let's see, next question. We don't have maintenance personnel in the store. How do we service, troubleshoot, and or repair this technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. We all think about retail stores and grocery. There's no electrical mechanical technicians available. You know, as I think this is where, from a Honeywell Intelligrated perspective, we have our Assurance 360 commitment on service and aftermarket. And this is where, you know, we can leverage our network, right, where we would have an embedded technician at each micro fulfillment center, but a network of technicians covering a broader urban area to work across all of the micro fulfillment centers. So I think even whether it be us or yourselves, that's the approach we've heard from customers, is that having a network of micro fulfillment centers is where you can leverage technicians across them, right? You don't need that highest level of technician at each micro fulfillment center, but you can leverage a network across your fulfillment centers. It's a good question.
Okay, moving on. This is a two-part question, pardon me. Is this easily scalable is the first part. And the second is, how does that impact ongoing operations?
Yeah, I think Eric, I'll take this one too. As we look at, actually I'll take this. So as we look at the two designs, one lends itself to more scalability. right? When we think about traditional shuttles and adding another aisle or adding a goods to person station, how you have to add some conveyor and you have controls wiring type changes, a little more challenging, right? In the dense storage, it's highly scalable, and we touched on that in terms of being able to add goods to person stations because they're integrated, or expand the grid or add robots. You know, those are all things that can be done with essentially no downtime. So what was the second part of the question, Tracy?
Sure. It was, how does that impact ongoing operations?
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, in the dense storage, it's really minimized.
Mm-hmm. And John, what I'd like to add to that is, I think you mainly focused on the core storage component of a micro-fulfillment center. There's also what we talked about was the mobile robots with AMRs or AGVs. What you can do there is increase your scalability by adding additional robots. Much like you could in the high density storage, but these are robots that are moving outside of that grid. So that's another way you can provide more scalability.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. How does the system handle an influx of orders with the same pickup time?
Yeah, so we touched on that a little bit. I think in any of these solutions, that's one of the challenges in terms of labor balancing, again, with the rush of orders coming at peak hours or even peak day like Sunday, where we would use this strategy of looking at inventory orders ahead of time and picking those orders and then staging them. The dense storage solution lends itself better to having more capacity to stage orders that we pick ahead of time back into the unit, so they're standing by to be picked when a customer gets close. I also think there's potential within a dense storage, if we can look out at the store inventory and those slow movers, that we can pick them ahead in the morning or from overnight orders and induct them into the dense storage unit for picking later in the day, right? So those are both areas where, although the focus was on throughput, you can get a lot more value if you can increase the density in storage locations for that slow mover pick aheads from the store and for leveling out your order flow throughout the day.
Okay. All right, I have another two-part question. Let's see, first part, maybe I'll just ask you a part. Well, I'll read you the whole question and then I can, if you need it again, that's not a problem. The first part is, are all order items picked from this system? And the second part is, if not, how is this alleviating aisle traffic in store?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, it depends, right? If this is a dark store, standalone urban area, not connected to a store, that's one situation. When it's connected to the store, we absolutely intend, when we think about maximizing value and ROI, to have some really slow movers picked from the store. Now we have to be thoughtful about what those are, and typically that's part of the upfront design and conversations we have, as we analyze SKUs and do the data analysis to pick the right ones. We want to really minimize the traffic, right, and the number of people manual picks that have to occur in the store. That's also where with our Momentum software, we'll look and we'll try to batch pick. So we're not just going into the store to pick one order. We're going to go and consolidate orders and go pick a number of picks at once to minimize that traffic through the store. So good question.
Okay, the next question is, how are orders consolidated from the AMRs to the delivery racks?
Yep, so it's similar in both designs, right? So our Momentum software is going to guide the picking. So whether it's from in-store or freezer or a case of water to bulk pick, right? The AMRs are going to help get that product to the goods to person station at the right time. And the operator then is going to then pick and consolidate it to the cart, the order cart. The key is that it's all guided by whether it be in-store picks or freezer picks or picks from the main automation unit. It's all guided by our Momentum software.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. What are the benefits of MFC over traditional DC fulfillment?
So John, let me chime in here. What I would say overall, the benefits are that it really allows customers here to use their brick and mortar stores to get closer to the customer, get the inventory closer to a customer. And that's what we were talking about before. I think one of the other challenges, I think it was the third challenge that thirdly ranked challenge that came up, was lack of space in urban areas. What we found is you can't really get these large traditional DCs into these urban areas. So a micro DC really allows you to get that footprint down to the right level in a cost-effective way that places the inventory closer to the consumer. Now, what we're not saying though is that that eliminates the total need for traditional DC fulfillment. You'll still need a traditional DC to feed into these micro DCs and to build out your overall network. John, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, then I will move on. Next question. How long to go live on one of these systems from date of order?
Yes, that's a great question. So, I mean, it depends, right? Dark store or bolt onto a store, whether or not you're building an addition. But I think in general, it's important to remember that on the first solution, we're going to want to have a few months up front to really do a design review and consulting and make sure we're analyzing the data and looking at what SKUs we want to put into this automation versus pick from store. Is it going to be curbside delivery or a combination thereof? So that, as well as, you know, defining the requirements for software with your WM and our solution. So you probably have a 6-month overall process on that first site that you will not have really on the future sites. So 12 to 18 months on a first deployment from the time we engage sounds about right, but you're certainly going to see that cut down, you know, drastically to 6 to 9 months, depending on the type of technology, as you begin to stamp these out into other locations.
Okay. Next question. What are some of the business models that you see used with this solution?
Yeah, so the way we envision this is there's actually two models, and the way we're looking at moving forward with this is a combination of those two models. And when I'm talking about two models, it's the CapEx model, the traditional model where you're paying for it all up front, and then more recurring models, which would be robot as a service or RaaS, where you're paying for that value over time. The way that we see this playing out is that it would be a hybrid of both of those. So we're looking at, for our offering, to have a hybrid model where we have an upfront payment and then a recurring fee. Now, all of that would be dependent on what exactly you're taking a look at and what your solution provides, of what those numbers would be, or what that precise pricing would be. Would it be dependent upon the solution? But that's what we see out there. We see us going forward. And when we look at the competitive landscape, we see a combination of those models as well.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, next question. What is the advantage of the shuttle-based system over the high density?
Eric, I can take that. So there's a place for both. And I think that's important to understand, right? If you think about bolting onto an existing store, there is a height or a certain dimensional range where the shuttle is going to actually provide similar density or perhaps a higher throughput. And those are things we work through upfront in the design process and evaluating both. That's one of the things we're excited about, is we do have both. So I think there's a sweet spot, right? If you're working with maybe a ceiling height under 15 feet, you know, low ceiling, for example, you're going to potentially get better value out of the traditional shuttle-based solution, assuming that you have some length to work with for that aisle as well? It's a good question.
Okay, next question. Does this solution handle items that are not prepackaged in some type of poly bag?
Can you repeat that again?
Sure. Does this solution handle items that are not prepackaged in some type of poly bag?
Yes. So this solution that we have laid out here within the automation, whether it be shuttle or the dense storage, both are tote based, right? So a product is decanted into the totes. So it could be cartons of groceries, it could be canned goods, really anything that essentially goes into the totes and fits within the weight constraints, which again in retail grocery typically isn't an issue. Totes handling maybe 40, 50, 60 pounds.
Okay.
So
sorry.
Just to clarify,
That's fine.
there's not a necessary precursor requirement that says it has to be in a poly bag.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, let's see here. Next question. How do you build in flexibility for the future so that the automation is not obsolete when product sizes change?
So the question is not so much about scalability, but if the product sizes change, I think that the challenge with that is with both of these solutions, with the shuttle and with the high density storage, there is actually a size limit to how big you can put a product in there. For example, so this has actually come up in calls. You can't actually fit a toilet into the high density storage solution. So until that technology progresses where you can, you can't put that in there right now.
But what we do is, if that's a concern or a changing business, certainly in the high density storage, even to a lesser extent in the shuttle storage, in high density, we have 3 different tote sizes we can work with. So we have had cases we pick the largest tote size and we'll subdivide it up so that in the future, if we want to take out those dividers to put larger items into the tote, we have that flexibility. So certainly part of that upfront consulting engagement period, those are the types of questions we would ask and make decisions based on.
Yeah, where we're going through and figuring out what fits with the system and what doesn't. So canoes, those aren't going to fit.
All right, gotcha. Okay, next question. Are you seeing micro fulfillment centers in suburban areas, or does it only make sense in urban areas?
So John, let me go at this first and then you can amplify it. So surprisingly, I think that when you read the literature, a lot of the literature and even our presentation talks mainly about urban areas. And we're starting to see the suburban and urban areas kind of being mixed. And when we talk to customers that are mainly focused on suburban areas, they also face the same challenges. So it's not so much, and that's where you see the challenge that customers are trying to solve here is getting the inventory closer to the consumer. Now those consumers can be in suburban areas as well. So it fits just as well in a suburban area. And what you're seeing in some suburbs, it depends how close you are to the city, some suburbs are actually space constrained as well, just building up to an urban area. And you have also zoning requirements and whatnot, so.
Okay, next question. Is there an ROI difference between the 2 options?
Well, I'd say in general, no. I mean, it depends on, and that's the first thing we're going to do is look at, based upon the available space and the SKUs and the order volumes you're trying to hit, which solution is going to lead us down the path of a better ROI. And it's not the innate solution itself many times. Many times it's the physical building and all the other surrounding factors we're looking at. We do see a more compelling ROI and more use cases from the dense storage by far, but both have a sweet spot that we talked on a little bit.
Okay. Next question. In a true omni-channel environment, the consumer experience has to be similar in whatever way they choose to interact with the retailer. So as you look at these potential solutions, are you interacting with multiple disciplines within the retailer to ensure the positive and consistent experience by the consumer?
Eric, do you want to talk about the VOC and efforts, or I can?
Yeah, so I think what we found is that it is a truly consumer experience. And particularly when you're getting into micro-fulfillment, we see a combination of supply chain people and retail stores people working together to ensure that that the solution really meets the consistent experience for the consumer. And what we're doing is working across those different groups to bring that experience together.
Okay. All right, this is a fairly specific question, so you know, you may not be able to answer it, but I'm gonna throw it out anyway. SKU count is a challenge here. My grocery clients have 3 times the number that you cited earlier in the presentation, more along the lines of 45,000 versus 15,000. What percentage of an order do you see picking in a 15,000 SKU cube?
Well, it's going to depend, and it's going to depend on the slotting. I mean, we typically see 85%, right, is where we see that if we get the slotting right and getting the higher movers. Now, keep in mind, if we put in the automated solution and we're getting 30% of the picks, it's not going to add value. So we also, you know, we showed 10,000 as a typical. As we go to dense storage, we can maybe get that to 15, 20,000 or additional available space, get to a higher level. So also in that situation, we might even look at, can we make the MFC a little larger to hold more SKUs, maybe 30,000 SKUs, but have it support maybe 4 stores for curbside? Right. Do we run some, you know, shipments between those stores to manage it effectively to leverage the automation to a higher extent? Eric?
And John, what I think where you're getting at is this would be highly dependent or heavily dependent on the customer's network, how that's laid out, and what they're trying to achieve. And that's where we work with in our pre-consulting engagements with John's team and OSD to really kind of work with our customers here to figure out what's the best fit and help to achieve those goals and work through those different scenarios that you just laid out there, John.
Great question.
Okay. And you know, I think, you know, you'll see customers that have like 3,000 SKUs that can be in a store. Well, not all of that will fit, and that's where so if you're trying to fit 3,000 into a micro fulfillment center, you're actually talking more of what we talked about, traditional fulfillment. And what we'd like to do is have those come in, those inquiries come in, and work with you guys to figure out, through John's team and my team, to figure out what's the best solution to meet your needs.
All right, perfect. Well, I think that's actually a great way to end the Q&A portion of the event, and that's really all the time that we have for questions today. So thank you to all of the attendees for such robust participation in the Q&A portion here. If we were unable to answer your question today during our live event, we'll send you a response via email. So thanks very much, John and Eric. And as a reminder to all of our attendees, approximately 48 hours after this live event, you can access this presentation on demand at intelligrated.com/on-the-move. And you'll also receive an email in a couple of days with a link to the recorded event, as well as a link to download the white paper titled Micro Fulfillment Strategies for the Future of Omnichannel Retail. So on behalf of Honeywell Intelligrated, thank you for attending today's On the Move webinar. We hope you can join us for one or both of our 2 remaining webinars this month as our Adapting to Modern Omnichannel Retail Challenges webinar series continues through June. Registration information can be found on our website at intelligrated.com /on the move. So thanks to everyone and have a great afternoon.